Who's that? Whoa. Whoa. Hi. I'm about to get creative. Drop a hint, pick up and get it. Never left on that you want it. I'm a taste and make you want it. If you buy your name, oh baby, still you always be my maybe. We can touch or make it real. I just like the way it feels. I just like the way it feels. When my fingers touch the screen, it gets physical. You got everything you need, it's medicinal. If I didn't have you now, I'd be miserable. Is this typical? My friends that are digital. Is this typical? Friends that are digital. I'm about to get creative. Drop a hint, pick up and get it. Never left on what you wanted. I'm a taste and make you want it. If you buy your name, oh baby, still you always be my maybe. We can touch or make it real. I just like the way it feels. I just like the way it feels. When my fingers touch the screen, it gets physical. You got everything I need, it's medicinal. If I didn't have you now, I'd be miserable. Is this typical? For friends that are digital. Is this typical? For friends that are digital. I just like the way it.
I think we're about to have a really rare episode on a Thursday.
Very rare. Very, very rare.
What the? Can you hear that voice? I don't know if anybody in the chat can hear that. That's a voice we don't hear on Thursdays.
What is happening? Wait, today's Thursday?
What? I don't know what's happening right now.
Is it a leap year? What's happening?
I'm confused with this voice, this person that never comes on a Thursday, even though it's his show.
Well, I mean,
did somebody invite you?
No, I don't know. I just showed up.
I love the chat's I love that the chat's freaking out right now. What the fuck is that, James? Ladies and gentlemen, let's start the show.
Distance nerding.
Hey! Hold on, James. Are you doing the dance party already?
I don't know what's happening. What part of the show are we in?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is now time. You are now watching The Build. Welcome to the show. I'm Young Phil. That man to my right now is a man that is never on Thursdays.
Never.
But we are happy to see him nonetheless. Jamez 5000 in the building for once. How are you doing, man?
Good, man. I just want to say what's up. I was just clicking buttons. I saw everybody talk in the chat, and I was like, oh, let me click on this. Next thing you know, I'm here. So, hi.
You're not going to be here all night, though, right?
No, I'm here for the fun stuff. I'm here for the guest. I'm here to hang out.
Exactly. And I mean, that's really the fun part of this whole thing, right? It's just
totally
hanging out.
I'm here because I'm jealous. I didn't get to go to LA Comic-Con and meet all the cool people that you got to meet. So I might as well jump in here to make sure I meet all the cool people.
Hey, you know what? We've had some of those people on the show already, and you've missed out on those. And we still have even more fun ones.
I know.
You know, we have even more fun ones, including today, man. Because today's guest, I'm going to put it this way. Zajac found him and introduced me to the guest, and he's a gem. Let's just go with that. So before we introduce the guest, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk sponsors, right? Let's talk about who brings us to the show here. Ladies and gentlemen, the show, the channel, everything that you love about Distance Nerding is brought to you by Poddex. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Poddex are a unique interview question and episode starting prompt in the palm
of your hand.
So whether you are a new podcaster or an existing broadcaster looking to grow your audience or get more engagement, level up with poddex.com. Now, guys, head over to www. Actually, there is no poddex.com anymore. Download the app. Download the Poddex app, guys, and use the code NERDING10 at checkout to get 10% off your order when you order things from Poddex. It is awesome. There's a combination of things from Poddex shirts to Poddex, memorabilia, merch, all the fun stuff, guys. So get in on that and get in with the pod deck stuff. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if the show is brought to you by Poddex, and you may be wondering, where the hell does young Phil's energy come from? Why is he always so upbeat and happy? I'm going to tell you what it is. Young Phil is brought to you by Dubby. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Dubby is a brand of energy drinks created to help focus, concentration, reaction time with no jitters or crash. Dubby contains no maltodextrin, no sugar, no fillers, no artificial colors or dyes. Now, guys, you may be wondering to yourself, what makes Dubby different from other gaming supplements that are out there? I'm going to tell you what it is. Dubby contains Neurofactor. Neurofactor is a neurotropic derived from the coffee fruit. It helps give your brain focus and clarity, while the 150 milligrams of caffeine and 3 essential B vitamins help keep you alert and energized. Guys, find out more about Dubby at www.dubby.gg. Use the code NERDING10 and get 10% off your order. It is worth it. It is delicious. They have all the fun flavors, and that's where that comes in.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's hard to be an emerging brand when you have like 37 flavors out. I don't know why you keep saying emerging.
Because that's what the copy says. So I have to remind myself not to.
Okay, Ron Burgundy, slow down there.
If it's remember, if it's on the teleprompter, I'm gonna say it that way.
Emerging brand
of energy drinks. So with that all being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get right to it. Let's bring on our guest. I'm very excited. I've had a chance to read his books and kind of look into more things about him. So let's get right into this, ladies and gentlemen. Today's guest is a writer. He's technically a filmmaker, but he's an editor, director, and more. He's worked on various short films as well as plays, and of course, an amazing book that we're going to talk about, comic book for those of you who are here on that. He's the writer of a book called Noir. The amalgamation of Edgar Allan Poe and film noir in a comic book form. It's amazing. So if you haven't heard of it, go now. Well, not now. Wait till after the show. But go and read yourself these books, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome on today's guest, Mr. Tim Zajac.
Hi. Good evening.
How's it going, Tim? How are you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Hello.
Hello, James.
Yeah, I'm James.
Hi,
hey,
nice to meet you.
I'm part of nice meeting you. I'm part of Distance Learning too. I didn't get to go to LA Comic Con and meet all the cool people, but Philippe was telling me about the book, and he gave me the tagline: a graphic anthology of murder, madness, and mayhem inspired by Edgar Allan Poe, written and produced by Tim. How do you say your last name? Zajac?
Zajac, like the game
Zajac?
show host. Yeah.
Oh,
like Pat
there you go.
Yeah, Zajac, yeah.
With art from Graham Sisk.
Mhm.
And I've been checking out the Facebook, and everything looks really cool. I'm super excited to talk about this with you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So with that all being said, we're going to get into a couple of intro questions here before we jump into you and everything you do. So I'm going to ask you some questions here. If a movie was made based on your life, who would you want to play you and why?
I get that I look like Ashton Kutcher a lot, but I don't know if he would fit the role. Maybe cosmetically. My knee-jerk is Tom Holland. He's just,
I like that.
There's an earnestness to him, and it's similar to the way he can embody Peter Parker, the everyman, getting the struggles, the highs, the lows of life. And I think that's probably off the top of my head, that's the best thing I can think of.
Is Tom Holland.
I like that.
See that?
He's more Peter Parker than he is Spider-Man.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
I like that. Humble. That's good. Hey, we have a segment on our show on Distance Learning that we call Growing Up Geeky. Is so let's learn about you. What did you geek out on when you were a kid?
Oh boy. It's kind of cool that this is like a Lego podcast because some of my earliest like nerd or geeky memories are
Uh-huh.
watching Star Trek and Star Wars and playing with my Duplos. So like this is pre-Lego era. This is like I'm young enough. I'm too little for the little pieces. So I've been given the Duplo, the bigger little
Yeah.
kid pieces, and I would build the spaceships and like fight out the spaceship battles as they were taking place on the TV screen. Always on our VHS because that's kind of my era. But Search for Spock, Return of the Jedi. I would go nuts with that Death Star battle at the end of Return of the Jedi.
Oh, that's awesome.
Anything with the Millennium Falcon or the Enterprise or a Klingon bird of prey, basically.
Sometimes all of it. Millennium Falcon versus the Enterprise. Let's make it happen. That's really cool. That's really cool. I remember doing that too. My brother was like really, really good at Legos. And that's a weird thing to say, but he had like that artist eye where he doesn't need instructions. He just builds things, and he would build like what was that show called? Space something. God, it's the Yamato. He built like the ship, the Yamato. What is that called? Star Blazers.
Yes.
Star Blazers. And he would build that, and I'd always be like, "Can I play with it?" He's like, "All right." I'm playing with this like 3 foot long, battleship, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So yeah, I think we grew up right around that same era, the Return of the Jedi. I was a latchkey kid, so I'd come home and just watch Star Trek. I don't know what I was watching. Like, this is really cool.
You wear out the VHS tapes.
Exactly. Which I still have because I'm Filipino and parents don't throw away anything. So
they're in storage for me somewhere. I'd have to dig them up.
Mine are still on display at my parents' house. They're like, "Oh, well, let's just leave those right here next to this huge stereo cabinet that never gets used."
It's the library.
Exactly. Where are you based out of? Are you down in LA? You guys met at
I'm
LA
based in LA. I'm originally from Chicago, but I've been here about 15 going on. Yeah, it was about 15 years, going on 16 actually in the summer. So
okay.
Midwesterner, but I've gone native in a handful of ways too. So
right, you're originally from Chicago, right? So our regular host, the guy who's normally on the show, is also from Chicago. So it's like that would be great, but he's not here tonight.
So what do you like better, LA or Chicago?
Oh, don't make me do that.
I'm gonna make you do it.
I'm really happy I live and work where I do. But my heart is in a couple of different places, and LA and Chicago are probably the two biggest ones. So gotcha. If the work and the finances allowed, I would probably I don't think bi-coastal is the right word unless you're considering the shores of Lake Michigan, but yeah, I mean, I'm where I need to be. I'll put it that way.
There you go. That's good. So I take it you must be. Are you in the industry? Are you a writer in the industry? Or
I wish. I work in TV. I'm an assistant editor, and I work on
that's
a handful
the industry.
Yeah. So that's I was almost literally working right down to the wire, right up until I jumped on with Philippe. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How cool is that? So, you're writing for TV. So, how and when did your love for writing come about? Has it always been a thing where like you needed to express yourself via writing, or is
it all kind of goes hand in hand. I'm kind of cross medium. Like when I was a kid, I made movies with like our VHS camcorder, and that kind of led me into theater in high school. I was also a band kid, so I started playing in the pit orchestra, and the theater kids kind of absorbed me, and I was already like this movie geeky kid and was making movies on my own. So that kind of segued into me becoming a theater kid, and I studied theater and film in college, and it brought me out here to try and figure out how I could make a living doing those things. And I'm still doing that. I'm still trying to figure out how to make a living doing those things.
I love that. That's awesome.
You toured around with a drum and bugle band, right?
Yes. I'm an alumni of the Glassman and Drum Corps International. So that's a very special part of my life that kind of helped form me into who I am. That helped give me an element of perseverance that I think aids me in the often rough waters of the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
And maybe a sense of presentation. Like you're almost like you're on stage. Like you have to present, you have to show up. So that's actually really cool. So I guess going back, kind of we talked about, what you geeked out on as a kid, but like what are some inspirations for you getting into, writing, or inspirations for Poe Noir itself? Like, where did all this come from? What did you grab onto, as you kind of started growing up, high school, college, where it's like, this is how I'm going to find my voice? Where were some of those inspirations?
Okay. Going the furthest back with comics, it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures. I was not bought the Mirage series, so I was bought the Archie series, which kind of became its own crazy thing. I'm a really big, I have fond memories of that series, and I'm not sure. I wish it was covered more. I wish people talked about it more, because that was some of my foundational reading. And then almost even bigger, it was the X-Men, starting with Claremont, and even through the 90s, which I know doesn't necessarily have the best reputation, but it was very formative for me. And the whole like found family element and just the thematic strength of that material, really, that's sort of my foundation. And jumping forward to Poe and Noir, I was in one of my film classes in college, and they were talking about how film noir, those movies have a basis in like the pulp fiction, the pulp novels, the dime novels of the early 1900s, and that is a literary tradition that goes all the way back to Poe. So sitting there, it was like lightning almost, where I was listening to how that kind of American storytelling continuum stretched from these movies that I was falling in love with to Poe, who I had fallen in love with in high school. I have very vivid memories of reading Poe in high school, and it just that was the spark to bring those two ends of the continuum together.
That's awesome. I did that. By the way, our good friend Jackie just jumped on one of our co-hosts, who's also a writer. So this is going to be a fun conversation. So I'm sure you guys are going to nerd out.
I think we met at LA Comic-Con.
We did.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Everybody knows each other. That's fine.
Great to be here.
What did I miss LA Comic-Con? Oh my goodness!
Because you're obsessed with being a good dad.
Yeah, probably.
You would just be a shitty dad; it'd be fine.
That's what James nerds out on are his kids.
That's awesome.
I guess so.
I love that he doesn't want to admit it. He's just like, no, I don't think so.
Well, can we talk about LA Comic-Con for a second and how y'all met? So, what were you doing at LA Comic-Con? Did you have a table? Did you have a booth?
Yeah, I was in Artist Alley. I've been doing LA Comic-Con going back to 2017, I want to say. It's been quite a few years, and that's one of my regular stops. And I have a great time there. And it's great to meet so many people that love the material the way I do. And I get to share it with them, thankfully.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Well, I mean, I went to LA Comic-Con, not this time, but the time before and the time before that. So I walked by your table probably. So maybe made eye contact or something. That's awesome. So you were at LA Comic-Con, had a table. Were you selling the book? My brain is going all over the place. You have the book, but do you have other merch as well? Because I always get fascinated with
we sell prints. We have T-shirts. The book is really the main focus, but there's like supplemental stuff, and depending on the con and depending who's at the table, like I'm often surprised at who like will grab onto a lanyard, for example, and they'll take their badge and they'll attach that to the lanyard they bought, and then they're repping Peau Noir for the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, I always think that's so cool how people get so attached to just like the merch, whether they know the material or not. Yeah, the tchotchkes of it.
Mm-hmm.
I always think that.
Well, that's
super
what kind
cool
of that's what kind of drew me to their table, anyways, because that's the kind of stuff.
There you go.
That's the kind of stuff. Philippe and I don't think I realized I was into like graphic novels and comic books until I met Philippe. I don't want to say until I met Philippe. I have to admit, I sort of like pigeonholed like comics or like superheroes and Marvel and Batman and this and that and this and that. And I'm just not into those kinds of things. I'm into like history and I'm into history in general. But I have a particular affinity for like golden age of Hollywood and that kind of thing. So I think that's why this is going to sound weird. I think that's why your table sort of stood out to me, is because the artwork is very like I don't want to say art deco, but like to me it's very art deco-ish. And then when I, like James was saying, is I do some of my own writing. I have throughout school and stuff, I was always told that I was a bad writer, but really what I'm realizing now is that they just meant like grammatically. But I've always really enjoyed like storytelling, and I've always really like enjoyed storytelling and stuff like that. And I had a teacher in the 8th grade who used to share Edgar Allan Poe stories with us. So I just recently listened to a podcast they talked about Edgar Allan Poe. So anyway, so when I saw your table, it was like, oh, I really like this artwork. It kind of fits with like this artwork that I like and a subject that I like. And that's kind of what drew me to your table. So I'll get off my soapbox, but but I think, I guess my point is that the reason what I liked about your table is that it wasn't like about necessarily like a superhero in the sense of like Marvel or DC. It was something that like people that are into history and other types of things could get some enjoyment out of.
Right. And she heard me nerd out on your book last night. It's like, as soon as I finished reading it, I was like, dude, so then this happened and then it was like this, and she was just like, she was like half.
Spoiler alert.
I was also falling asleep, but it had nothing to do. No, I was interested in it.
That's what I'm saying. She was half dead. So I mean, like,
yeah. So yeah, no, it's super interesting.
We all, that's one of the common threads of talking to people at the cons, is everybody seems to have a memory of reading Poe in school. I think it's very hard to go through school in this country and not touch upon something from him. And there's quite a variety of what people cite as their favorite, or what struck them, what their vivid memories of reading Poe were. And that, for me, it was Cask of Amontillado, which is why that's the very first story I adapted, you know. And for a lot of people, it's The Raven. The Simpsons is somewhat to blame for that too. The Simpsons has a great adaptation of The Raven. He's kind of in the DNA of American culture, and like we don't pay attention to that. Not that it's mandated, but he's there lurking, in horror and in mystery and in crime, detective. There's a whole bunch of genres and storytelling things in our culture that he's there somewhere. So
yeah. When we were talking about you on our Tuesday show, on our news show, and we were talking about the interview today, we were talking about that. Like, is Edgar Allan Poe like a required reading for school? Because everybody feels like they have something or have some kind of a history with it, and so we weren't sure. We're like, were we told to read this, or did everybody just gravitate to it at some point in time?
I was not an English major. I don't have like the most cred, but I want to say that he is one of the earliest like American-born authors that has survived to modern era.
Yeah. I distinctly remember in high school, my freshman year, we had to read Telltale Heart. So
Okay,
My
that's
only,
cool.
yeah,
Hey, you mentioned.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say my
No,
only
go ahead.
experience where it was in 8th grade. We had a teacher who used to make us. We used to read a lot of short stories, like O. Henry stories and Edgar Allan Poe stories and stuff. So that's kind of what my introduction to him was.
Cool. Very cool. Hey, I was gonna jump back. You mentioned like cross media, like you kind of do cross media stuff. So how did the thought of the Poe Noir end up in your brain, and then how did you choose to adapt that into, say, a comic book versus animation or a novel, or film, or video, something else? Like how did it end up being a comic?
Okay, that's an amazing question. So this project, this idea, does go back to me sitting in film class, and then it wasn't until years later that a dear friend and collaborator of mine, we always bonded over comics, and he really pushed me to move it into that medium, and that's one of the things that I love about comics, and it kind of touches on Jackie's point about how like the medium can be used for other things. It's not just for superheroes, and
Right.
that's sequential art, I guess, is a one way that I've heard it put, and it's really cool when it's used in storytelling that we wouldn't expect, or that doesn't necessarily dominate what we think of when we think of comic books.
Good point. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that, and I think it gives more dimension to the term comic books or graphic novels or whatever it may be. But I think giving more to the medium and showing the diversity of it is cool. I think I started out just like you. I started out with Teen Titans, and then X-Men, and then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was my growing up. So seeing it more, and I think I gravitated like after Teen Titans, and then you go to X-Men that gets a little bit more adultish, and you get to TMNT when there's a little bit more graphic stuff going on. It just shows the diversity of what you can do with that medium. But yeah, I kind of wanted to, like, as a creator, like, how do you choose a medium to jump into? I guess.
And I was gonna say, if we're gonna say TNT specifically, we're talking graphic stuff. We're talking Laird and Eastman.
If I may, it sounds like what another. Sorry, I don't. Sorry, I can't always find my words. That's why I write. So I guess when you decided to take this venture with this particular concept, did you always know that you were going to do like a comic book or a graphic novel, or did you try other ways of putting your work out? And like, I guess that's like kind of my question.
In terms of executing the project, the comic is the first like true stab at like bringing it to life. It had long been coming out of my film noir class. It was definitely a screen adaptation idea, and there are incarnations of it in feature form, and then I kind of evolved, and I feel like if it were to jump to the screen, it would be probably better on television. Just seeing how prestige television has evolved and what it's capable and willing to do. But really the first true execution of the project for like public consumption basically is in the form of this comic book.
Interesting. Can I go? I'm gonna go so behind, like deep into asking the behind the scenes stuff, but like I know you have like some editing and producing experience in your background. What did you say you did for TV again? You did.
I'm an assistant editor, so it's post-production for a number of television properties.
Okay, I definitely want to get into that because that sounds super interesting. But knowing that you're going to create this Poe Noir, and it's really cool, and the visuals totally grabbed me. What is it like having this vision, having this idea in your brain, and turning around and saying like, I need somebody to create this vision for me and what it's going to look like, you know, and that needs to grab people. What is it like going from in your head to working with an artist, working with another person, collaborating on your idea, your baby, and before you put it out there to the world?
That's really where I fall back on my directing background, regardless of whether it be stage or screen. Like, one of the things that was really drilled into me when I was training as a director was how to work with actors and how to communicate your ideas and how to communicate what like the intentions of the piece are. And I have to say, like, when I'm writing my comic book scripts, I really, when I'm working with Graham, it's very similar to the way I work with actors. And in both cases, like, they're doing something that I cannot do. I have just stratospheric admiration for actors and for artists, because the few times and instances I've attempted it, I've fallen on my face, and I understand how difficult it is to do what they do at a certain level. So, and the cool thing about working with Graham over the years is that I learned to write for him. So as I got to know him, and as we kind of started to understand where each other's sensibilities are and where our interests lie and the kinds of things that we're really into, the things that get us amped, you know, I could kind of I could really tailor my writing to that audience of one, knowing that really it came down to how he was to understand my writing and how he was to interpret it. And with this most recent book, it really, I mean, I almost don't want to jinx us because it works so well. Like, it's almost like he's reading my mind now, because, or maybe it's working the other way around, where I can go, ooh, I know Graham's really jiving about this. So maybe if we frame it this way and we pace it this way, maybe that'll get him really excited, and then he'll just take off from there. And so far, so good. This most recent book is really an example of how far we've come together in that way.
Cool. I've always wondered about that. Like, that's something whenever we talk to comic creators, whether it's an artist or the writer, I'm like, how does that work out, of taking your vision and putting it out there? Or when I talk to an artist, you know, one of our good friends writes a few comic books, but like, how do you interpret somebody's ideas and be true to that without influencing, or maybe it is okay to influence what is putting down on paper or on iPad or something like that?
I think it's really, there's a middle road. It's a meeting of the minds and hearts, and if we really understand each other, and I guess I have to keep my own house in order. If I'm communicating as clearly as I can, then I know I'm setting Graham up for success as best as I can. So, and that's the same thing when I'm directing. Like, at some point, it is out of my hands. I have to let it go, and I have to really commit to trusting my collaborators. And so much of my prep, regardless of whether or not I'm directing or if I'm writing for a comic book, that really is kept in mind, that like, this is going to leave me, you know, like it may be, yeah, it's my baby, but like, it's going to be their baby too. And like, if I'm working with the right people and we're really jiving and we're really committed to doing cool stuff, to really doing the best work we possibly can, then like, I don't have to worry. I know I can hand it off, and I know however it's going to get executed, it's going to come to life in the best possible way. So I think there's I don't know if humility is the right word, but you have to be willing to let go to a certain extent. And I find as it's easier to let go if I'm as prepared as possible, and if I really have my stuff together. If I know what I'm communicating, I know how I'm what I'm handing off, then I don't have to worry about how it will be received. And then it's almost like I'm trying to, I don't know.
It's almost like a
analogy. Like I'm going to hand off the ball, and I know they're going to run to the end zone. You know?
Yeah. Well, I'm saying, like, it's almost like a trust fall.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great analogy. That's even better than the football analogy, to be honest.
Again, I have 3 kids, so my little metaphor in my brain is like, you're gonna go like co-parent, or let a babysitter watch your kid, and they're going to help, or a coach, and the coach helps shape that kid and their mentality of how they're going to look at life. So that's
and you have to trust.
But I think there's probably, I mean, I don't know your experience, obviously maybe we can get to that, but no. It seems like whenever I've always worked really well with somebody, those things tend to come very natural and easy, and it's almost like those instances where like you finish each other's sentences, and they like help inspire you and make your ideas better. I know that like when I share my stories with people, sometimes, especially when I'm still developing them, there are people who every once in a while, like I have a friend who she's not into the stuff that I'm into. She's a dietitian, and when I was sharing this one story
she's
with
into
her.
Dieting. Ugh.
No, she's not. She's a non-diet dietitian. Anyway, so when I was sharing her this story, I was sharing her this one part of the story, and she was like, "Oh, maybe in this part of the story, this character could do this." And I was like, "Oh my God, I love that idea." So I imagine with you, and you said their name is Graham.
Yeah, Graham is our artist. Yes.
Okay. I have a little bit of a hearing problem, and I imagine that you guys have had similar instances like that maybe you could share with us. That you can maybe remember of like times.
Ooh. I think
spill the tea is what you say.
I want to fall back on the new book because like I feel like more than anything else I've written for this project so far, I was writing it for him, knowing what he was into. And Graham loves horror. He turned me on to Jeff Lemire, and
real quick, we're talking about the Dupine Files.
Yes, the Dupine Files. This is our new the serial phase. This is we've moved past our anthology issues, and this is our new ongoing. And we're covering Poe's detective stories. He did a couple of them with the same character, and we've adapted them. And so Graham is into horror, and there is an element of the Murders in the Rue Morgue. I guess I can spoil the original Poe. The murderer in Murders in the Rue Morgue is an orangutan, and like they couldn't figure it out. Like that's kind of the whole crux. This guy coming in and putting it all together when like dozens of the Parisian law enforcement just could not piece it together. And it's kind of horrific the way the orangutan commits these murders. The orangutan doesn't really know what it's doing, but that's sort of irrelevant because like it's kind of really gross how it goes down. And so knowing that Graham was really into horror and knowing his sensibilities and interests there, the way we adapted the orangutan, the way I hopefully set those panels up for him, those were hopefully, I think I can confidently say that he nailed them. Like I didn't know how exactly he was going to implement them, but I knew that if I set him up the right way, whatever his brain would do would be freaking amazing. And some of the two of those splash pages with those little glimpses of the orangutan in that very first issue, I was like,
oh yeah,
nailed it.
Nice. So do you get like almost storyboard for him, or is it almost like a written storyboard?
It has to be. I don't want to try with pen and paper or with stylus and tablet or whatever. I don't even want to go there. Like at no point I don't want to. It's again back to my directing background. It's like giving an actor a line reading. Like I don't. It doesn't matter how I can do it. It really matters how my collaborator is processing the story we're trying to tell, the character beats, the thematic elements, and how they digest that and bring it to life. So it really does come into my writing. So like, I guess, I'm writing storyboards. I try to keep it as descriptive as possible, but also as open as possible for Graham to interpret it and put his own spin on it. And so like, it's probably somewhere in the middle always of where like I'm thinking it could be and where maybe he's intending it. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but like I said, with this book, it really is about setting him up for success. And so it's a mix of detail and a little bit of vagary just so he can fill in those blanks and bring it to life in his way. Because I want him to put his stamp on it too, of course.
So this book is more of a collaboration than just, hey, be my artist type thing.
I hope comic books work that way. When I listen to or read Chris Claremont talk about the artists he worked with on that initial 15-year X-Men run, like, you know, talking about what the strengths of a Byrne versus Cockrum, and not that either were subpar, just some, you know, one would do the quiet character beats better and the other would do the action set pieces better. And that doesn't mean one or the other is better. It just, he knew how to tailor those particular moments for each particular artist because that's where their strengths, their interests lie.
That's cool. I like that.
You know, when you were a minute ago, when you were describing, a minute ago when you were describing like how you guys collaborate together. I could, you know, I don't work with an artist or I haven't gotten that far in life yet, but one of the things that when like with my writing is there are certain things that like I want them to be like super specific. And then in other times I want them to be specific enough to give some sort of structure, but I want the reader to like fill in their own images, or fill in their own, like I recently wrote this thing, that I recently wrote this thing where I just talk about like vintage signs. Like I don't say like what the signs say because I want people to picture their own like version of a vintage sign, not my vintage sign. And then other times, like I do want things to be like super specific, where like I want there specifically to be these types of flowers or these types of trees or these types of colors. So it almost sounds like you kind of do, you know, you're specific about the things you want to be specific about, but then you're not so specific about the other things. And then that's kind of where Graham's genius comes in and like paints those pictures, literally and figuratively, for other people to enjoy and read your stories on them.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good, I guess, regurgitation of the process. My mind went immediately to a tin Coca-Cola sign from like 100 years ago. So is that, you know?
Yeah, that's also described.
Yeah, it could literally be whatever you want it to be. So it sounds like you do that on paper, and then Graham takes that and then like projects some sort of image. So.
Yeah, and that does come back to being prepared. Like I know what story I want to tell. I know the material I'm adapting. So I have to know the bones of it. I have to know the elements that are important. I have to know all those beats. But you know, I'm going to keep speaking in analogies because that's kind of how I work as a creator. Like I can write down the music, but I'm not going to play it, you know. That's for Graham. And you know, he's an outstanding musician in that context. And actually I think he's a real life musician too, if I'm not mistaken.
I was gonna make a joke. I'm like, and he's doing music?
I think
making
he's
this
a
guy
drummer.
work.
He'll have to correct me when he listens to this, but I think he's a drummer. So
weren't you a drummer? Don't you have that connection?
I when I marched with the Glassmen, I played baritone, and going back even further, I played sax because that's what my dad played, and that was kind of how I came up in music. So in addition to the marching world, like my other love is jazz. I got so much out of playing my sax in the jazz band. So that's another thing. I'm listening to jazz all the time when I'm writing this, just because it's part of the time period. But it also there's something about the structure where it's like jazz is has a chaotic nature to it, but also everybody also has to come together and like state the theme before they get into their solos, and all that chaos happens, and like that really helps my brain, because that's kind of what writing is to me. I know the structure, but then there's a chaos in like trying to figure out how to do it, you know?
That is literally our show. There's like a framework of like, hey, this is what we have to get through, all you jabronis, but it always happens where it's just tangents and tangents and jokes and people talking over each other, but it always like, hey, come back to the foundation, come back to what we need to talk about. And so I kind of relate it to jazz in a nice way, where it's like, hey, as long as we're following the structure, you guys can go off and do whatever we need to do, but sooner or later we got to come back to keep the song going.
Yeah, it's how to piss off James 101. It's great.
But you know, not a lot of people, I'm realizing more and more, is not a lot of people's minds paint those vivid pictures and stories and stuff in their minds. I mean, I'm sure many people do, but I used to think everybody did, and not everybody does. So I'm glad that you have put it on paper so that other people can enjoy it.
Thank you.
Speaking of putting it on paper, can we talk about your process? How do you take a work from, Edgar Allan Poe, thinking about, I want to put this in a world, and then put visuals behind it and communicate this as a comic book or a graphic novel?
Well,
to walk us through like how this goes.
To like take it a step further, right? Because like if you've read the books, like choosing kind of some of the stories that you chose to do. So specifically with Fall of the House of Usher and with the Pit and the Pendulum, the way that you adapted those stories are very. It's like you transported a story to something that actually took place in the 1930s. So it's like 100 years later, and it's like translating perfectly in the way you're telling the story. So it's like, the Al Capone of it, the House of Un-American Activities situation that's going on, like that blew my mind when I started reading that, and I was like, wait, this is the Pit and the Pendulum? And then I went back and read the Pit and the Pendulum, and I was like, it is the Pit and the Pendulum. Holy shit.
I'm so glad you've made that connection. So you got to read the Poe for one thing. And the funny thing about Poe is that a lot of his stories kind of are stationary in a sense. Like House of Usher takes place in the house, maybe they move from room to room or they go down to the basement, whatever. Pit and the Pendulum takes place in that cell that the protagonist is stuck in, waiting for that scythe to come in and take him out. Right. And when I dug into like the historical context of Pit and the Pendulum, for example, that takes place during the Spanish Inquisition. So that guy's in there. It doesn't say why exactly, if I remember correctly, but he's basically in there because of who he is. If the Spanish Inquisition's after you, it's probably because there's something not jiving with the Catholic Church, and thus those people are authorized to hold you, punish you, do whatever to you to get you to either conform or to get rid of you, right? It's kind of a dark period, a dark element of human history, but that's kind of the gist of it. And being in the entertainment history, being industry, being a student of film, I am kind of obsessed with that Red Scare in the late 40s and early 50s, because Congress really went after Hollywood. And like it to me, this is not, I don't want to get too political, but it shouldn't matter to Congress what somebody's individual points of view are, and there was nothing, confirmable. There was nothing really concrete that Congress could pin on any of these entertainment professionals that were called to testify. In some cases were blacklisted. Like they didn't do anything wrong other than like having certain beliefs or political views. And that kind of jived perfectly with the subject material of Pit and the Pendulum and the Spanish Inquisition. you believe a certain thing, you are a certain way, and you're being punished for it, basically. So that's how I made that connection. And just putting it in the point of view of two friends, maybe more than friends, and entertainment professionals, that was kind of how I was able to put myself into it to a certain extent. And with that as sort of the seeds planted, I could run with it. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, man. I'm a big, massive fan of good storytelling, and that's like good storytelling 101, especially when you're adapting something and modernizing something. It's it was I hate to big you up, but I'm gonna big you up, man. That's a masterclass right there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Philippe, can you big me up later too? I mean, that'd be nice if you could.
You're a good dad.
Who are you?
Oh, okay. Oh, it's okay. It's so rude. So rude. All right, I'll take that, Philippe. So, all right, Tim. Jumping back, can we talk about some of? We talked about Poe Noir. Can we talk about some of the work you're doing in TV? Can I say Hollywood? Is that weird to say?
You can say Hollywood. Hollywood is less a place as it is a community. That's probably a good way to put it.
Gotcha.
So I am the lead AE on Married at First Sight. It's an unscripted show. It airs on Lifetime, and I think you can find it on Hulu and Netflix as well. And I just got lucky to get sucked into that show, and we're kind of on the way out of airing season 17, and we're not too far away from airing season 18, which will be later this year.
I think. Is that on Netflix? Because I think my wife was watching that.
Earlier seasons. I'm not sure how the progression works, but it's. I'm reminded of when I was going through Better Call Saul, because Better Call Saul was dropping like a season earlier on Netflix than was actually airing, and there's something like that with Married at First Sight as well. Like they're not up to date because of whatever agreements are in place. So I don't know how far those seasons go with that show on Netflix right now, but I know it is not up to date. So the current season would not be on Netflix. But I think if my previous understanding of how we rolled with Hulu, you might be able to watch more recent seasons, if not the current season, on Hulu as well. Or you could just jump on Lifetime too. That's the other option.
Yeah. I've seen a few of the streamers do that where it's like, we're gonna you get season 1 and 2, and then we get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then it jumps back to the other streamer. It's crazy.
We've been going so long that I kind of gave up on trying to keep track.
That's funny. So you mentioned that you have the anthology, but now you're going into the next phase. Yes. So is it going to be like a comic book, I don't know, a month? Each month you're going to put out a new book? Is it, what do we do? What's the plan for the release?
With time and money, I am unfortunately not that prolific. That is always gnawing at me. I wish it could be once a month. I'm still collecting X-Men, and there's always a thrill every month when I have to go to the shop and get my pull. And I really wish that could be me. But alas, give or take the pandemic, we've been averaging about an issue a year. And part of that is Graham's workload too. He has quite a few clients. He's working on comics. He has quite a resume in the gaming space, tabletop card games and such. And I have to, I support him wholeheartedly, of course. And it's also a matter of jiving with his schedule too. So the plan thus far is for issue 2 to come out later in the year. And if the last year is any indication, it'll hopefully be around LA Comic-Con, much like this past year with issue number 1.
So that would be October of 2024.
Yes.
And they're moving it. So okay, cool. See how I did that? I'm getting the inside scoop behind the scenes.
So fingers crossed. A lot of it's on me. I have not given him the script yet. So I'm gotta get on it. So this is my accountability to all you out there in the internet. Tim, get on it. That
works. Hey, whatever it takes. So this every time I talk to a comic book creator, it's always like, here's the book I'm pushing and I'm super passionate about it. Kind of like a cosplayer, like this is my cosplay. But then they have like 3 other cosplays that they're waiting to do. Are there other uh ideas running around your head that's getting in the way of the next, Poe Noir
I want to say a
issue?
little bit. I really try and stay focused on the Poe Noir,
It's good.
but there is a Peter Pan adaptation that has a history in other mediums. It was a play that I directed over 20 years ago, and that would be pretty amazing in comic book form. I've often thought about screen adaptation for it, but in terms of like actually having like the capacity to execute, like comic books is probably where it's at because I've already figured out how to do this on my own in comics.
Mhm.
And there are screenplays I've written that could definitely translate to comics that are kind of also in the same vein, not genre, but idea as bringing Poe to comics. They're things that you wouldn't really think would be comic books, but I could see adapting them in that way, and I wonder how that would go. I wonder how people would respond, and yeah, depending on the property, it also is a matter of finding the right team. So, I'm lucky with Poe and Poe Noir that I have Graham because
Mhm.
that's again like lightning striking. He's the guy.
That's cool.
Mhm.
That's cool.
Hear that, Graham? You're the man.
You're the man, Graham.
I cannot praise Graham enough. So when he listens, I hope you're blushing, Graham, because we all love your work.
There you go. How much creative freedom do you have as a writer when it comes to taking an existing work and a lot of times beloved pieces of work and adapting it to, some kind of comic book or graphic novel with Graham? Like, what kind of creative freedom do you give yourself / take the initiative on?
Well, the Poe died in the mid 19th century, like I want to say 1840s, 1850s. So that's been in the public domain.
Oh, okay, cool.
I pretty much have free reign to do
Okay.
whatever I see fit. But I don't know. I'm pretty passionate about adaptation. And like, if you're going to adapt something, I think you need to love it and you need to understand it.
And be true to it, so to speak.
Yeah. So like,
Okay, cool.
I wonder how people respond to some of the anthology stories because like, it's kind of like Philippe was saying, like he read our Pit and the Pendulum adaptation and wasn't quite sure like how it was relating to the Poe. But then when he looked back at the Poe, he was like, whoa. So I really try and figure out what that nugget, what that little kernel of truth that Poe is digging around. And that's kind of what gets into the DNA of the work. Yeah, and now if I'm gonna tangent on, the would-be Peter Pan property, like I would have to research the public domain status. I know that is evolving, and as we, march through the 21st century, like it's probably going to get easier and easier for me to adapt, if I'm not mistaken. But the last time I looked, like I wouldn't necessarily have free reign the way I would with Poe. So there is some homework to be done with that, and that kind of comes into the way we see like Tolkien adapted, or I just went through The Last of Us, which I loved as a game, and now I love even more as a TV show. Like you need the rights, so that's kind of the business starting point of it. But the creative starting point is really understanding it, loving it, and having an idea of how to communicate what you love and what that emotional truth of the story is. And with The Last of Us, it was love. It was all the pros and cons, the perils and the beauty of love, no matter how great or terrible it could be. And I don't know, going through the TV show from Druckmann and Mazin, like they nailed it almost better than the game. I hate to say it, but
sometimes an adaptation can do that where it's like, hey, these are maybe some of the things that weren't quite right or didn't translate during a
Mhm.
writing or a comic, let's update them. I mean,
Mhm.
it's kind of interesting.
And
Tim, I
depending
just
on
want
your medium, like, some mediums are better at communicating certain themes and certain
good point.
methods than others.
Good point. Very good point. Tim, I have to jump off. I appreciate you so much. It's been so cool. Please share the books with me as well, because Philippe
Okay.
tends to steal them all. So I don't know
I
if he has
sent you the
physical
link.
copies.
I literally sent you the link again before the show.
Okay. I got a link. All right. Tim, you're great. Thank you so much.
Thank
I'll
you.
let you
Thanks
guys
for
keep
having me.
talking. I know you got more questions, Philippe, especially some X-Men stuff. You guys are gonna nerd out, so I'll let you guys handle that.
Oh yeah. And so I've got definitely more questions for you here in regard to all this stuff. So just to jump in on all this
Really quick before we jump in on that, I had a question. I had a question about
Yeah.
what you were previously talking about. Just to wrap that up for myself. So you were talking about this like the Peter Pan property. You were
Mhm.
like thinking. I guess my question with that is what, and I'm just curious is what why would you want to go with the like Peter Pan property and not just make your own character?
There's something about the idea of eternal youth and how that butts heads with the stark reality of adulthood. I don't know. There's a certain magic to that property, and that thematic material is so rich. It's almost richer than you got. Like when you really think about it, it's richer than we realize.
Mhm.
And I think maybe it also has to do with me being a kid and falling in love with Hook. My mother would cite the '50s Disney movie, but for me, it really was Hook. And I know Spielberg is not the biggest fan of that in his pantheon of films, but like if you're of a certain age, like Hook is it. And when you do grow up, I hate to say, when you do grow up and you read the Barry, the original text, and you dig into his storytelling and like all those themes and all those things echoing around that, like you see how good Hook was and how much they really did love that source material and how they were able to take it and tell a completely different story that kind of expands the mythos. So, in some ways, the story that I would be adapting or retelling from Peter Pan would be almost like a prequel to Hook. It would take place in between the original Barry and, the Spielbergian Hook.
Yeah, because like half of Hook didn't make sense to me until I went back and read the Barry.
Oh, okay.
Like when I went back and read Barry, it was like, oh, okay, that's why half of the Lost Boys have names, and they were just named after their onesies in the Disney movie. Like because Disney was just like, oh well, we don't want to confuse kids, so we're gonna name them after their onesies in the book, but in reality, they're supposed to be they're supposed to have names. And then again, like the food fights, right? Like that's something that takes place in the Barry book. Just it's also like when you go back and read the Barry book as an adult, you realize that Peter Pan is a sociopath.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
But we'll sweep that under the rug.
and that's kind of the way Pan and Hook are two sides of the same coin is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because like Hook is stuck in middle age. And Hook is stuck in a place that it's not fun to be in. You don't have fond memories of being stuck where he is. He's stuck having to think of what he sees anytime that punk flies by. So and at the same time, Pan is immature and incapable of understanding people a certain way, a number of ways, because he is so young. So there's a yin and yang there that is very rich to mine, I think.
It sounds like me and Philippe's marriage is what it sounds like. All right, we could go ahead and move on to X-Men. I was just curious.
And he's like, you said it. I'm not touching that. So and it's not just jumping right into X-Men. It's more some of the writers that you've listed as your influences, right? Like, of course, you talked about in your whole thing there. You talked about specifically about Chris Claremont, but I kind of noticed, you did mention that Frank Miller was an influence for you.
More so from like a thematic and visual sense. I
And
love his Daredevil.
Yeah.
I love his Daredevil. Like, next to the mutants and Peter, Matt is my favorite Marvel character. And he seemed to really capture what it was like to be stuck in Matt's shoes. And how Matt navigates being blind, but also being like overpowered with, sensory stimuli. And Matt really gets beat up. Matt gets beat up even more than Peter does. I was almost going to say he gets beat up more than Logan does, but Logan gets beat up quite a bit.
What I was going to bring up with that specifically was the artwork that Graham does is very, very similar to, not similar in like the art style itself, but like just kind of like the use of shadows and noir and all that. It's very Sin City.
Yeah, Miller does definitely. He shares some conceptual influences. I have a feeling, especially when you watch Sin City, it's undeniable. Like, he's probably seen things like Double Indemnity or Sunset Boulevard or Maltese Falcon. Like, it's very hard to deny that era of cinema and its influence on him, both as an artist, as a storyteller, and how those have translated to the screen.
Right. And not only that, like, I mean, and I guess you could say that you can see some influence in the spirit too, but I mean, like, just in the way that those books run, same thing. Like, if you go and read Dark Knight Returns, it's the art style is very similar, and I picked up on that immediately. It was easy to follow. The line work was really good, shadowing, and it's just kind of like, was that influence deliberate when you were looking for an artist, or we never asked, when you and Graham hooked up, how did you guys hook up? Were you looking for an artist? Did you just kind of find him?
It was on Craigslist, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
The ad, of course, yielded a number of responses that, right away you're like, no, thank you. But, looking at his portfolio, he immediately had in it a story that took place in like 1890s Paris. And like the sample boards or the sample pages and panels were all taking place at night. And the first Poe story that I adapted was Cask of Amontillado, and I moved it from Venice and Carnival to New Orleans, which of course has a heavy French influence. So seeing, turn of the century Paris rendered in light and shadow like that, it's kind of serendipitous, but it was almost exactly what I was looking for when it came to bringing Cask of Amontillado to life a couple decades later in a very French-influenced American city.
Yeah, and again, that's very it's very apparent, right? But it's in a good way. So I did pick up on that. No, so as far as X-Men goes, I gotta ask, man, favorite Chris Claremont run? Go.
I am big on Days of Future Past, of course, but I have to kind of lean on the stuff I read when I was a kid. I've read a lot of it since then, and digesting it as an adult is a different experience. But his swan song, those last few months and years, particularly when he was writing that last arc of X Factor with the original 5, and when Cyclops has to give up his baby to the future because Apocalypse has infected him with the techno-organic virus, like, that really resonated a lot as a kid, and now as a relatively new dad, it hits me even harder now. Like, the only way that Scott could guarantee the survival of his son was to give him up and send him into the future. And of course, later on, we figure out that boy becomes Cable and comes back in time, and then we have all sorts of crazy stories where, like, he's hanging out with his son who's like 20 years older than him. So that kind of like planted the seeds for that. And I don't know how much of that was only Claremont or if that came with his collaborations with like Louise Simonson and working with Bob Harris. And I know there's a lot of contentious elements of that with Claremont leaving that initial run, but that really had a mark on me. And then the granddaddy of them all is X-Men 1, adjectiveless X-Men 1. That last arc, that was the last stuff he wrote, and he really that presented Magneto to me in a way that humanized him. I love how Claremont took Magneto from Silver Age mustache twirling villain and really made him this complex character that really is neither hero nor villain nor anti-hero. He's just such a well-rounded human being that has suffered and that has really strong beliefs, and that all comes from a place of compassion and empathy, and that nonetheless can drive him to do despicable things. So there's just so many complex layers to that. And that last arc, those first 3 issues of adjectiveless X-Men are basically him saying goodbye to Magneto. And Magneto in those 3 books, and of course penciled by Jim Lee in maybe no better manner, like that really left a mark on me as a kid, and even as an adult, as a creator.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you on that. Just the way, just in general, the way that Claremont wrote his stories is it was in a humanizing way, and he kind of changed a lot of like people's perceptions on how they look at these characters, and I think that's why his runs are so prolific. That's why everybody loves Chris Claremont so much.
I'm gonna be transparent. I don't really know a lot about X-Men. But listening to you describe it makes me think a lot about the Scarlet Witch and her relationship with Vision and the whole WandaVision. So up until WandaVision, my favorite like superhero movie or whatever was Guardians of the Galaxy because I really liked the music in it. But then when Philippe made me watch WandaVision, the way you just described, I can't remember the character's name with Magneto, and I can't remember, what was the character you were just talking about? The person who has to send their son into the future. Cyclops, yeah. So like they're that's the same person that has this like that relationship with Magneto, right? It's the same character.
It's been retconned back and forth, but I refuse to see the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver as anything but Magneto's children. That's like core canon for me. I'm sorry, like.
We'll see, and I was just more so thinking about how, like, with Wanda, like my perception of Wanda, because she's one of my favorite characters because just like with most of these types of characters, you tend to resonate with characters that you identify with, that you think have been through. That you think that have been through like the same things. And when I watched WandaVision and I watched like how Wanda got to the point of where she got to and why she did the things that she did, it was like, so I like getting emotional thinking about it because that's exactly how I feel about very similar things that I went through in my life. And so when you were just talking about it, I just was thinking about how like she's not good, she's not bad, she has her own internal struggles. Like she's not out to create like mayhem and evil, but it just gets expressed that way. And that seems very similar to how you were describing those X-Men characters. So
that's why I would say Claremont is such an influence on me as an adult and as a creator, because he really strove to make his characters human, regardless of good, bad, whatever. Just everybody's got their strengths and weaknesses. Everybody's got the issues, the things that kind of feed them and who they are. And it was crazy to look back and see how he was able to take really flat 2-dimensional characters and make them relatable. you know. And I was just, even today, I follow the Claremont Run on Twitter, and they were posting about Kitty Pryde and how Claremont making Kitty Pryde the POV character in the late 70s, early 80s was revolutionary, because prior to that, no one had made a 13-year-old girl the protagonist of a superhero comic.
Right.
And yet what he did is he made the POV character of that series much closer in age to the target audience, and infinitely more relatable, because we've all been teenagers, we've all been awkward, we all have been in situations where we don't know what we're doing, we don't know who we're dealing with, we're getting to know people, we're getting to know ourselves, and like that was kind of a paradigm shift in comic book writing to a certain extent, because prior to that, it was in X-Men, at least, Scott Cyclops was the POV, and then you go from I-beam blasting male to a young and notably Jewish 13-year-old girl. So, and that ties into the thematic material too of the mutants being hated and feared and trying to find their way in a world that hates and fears them.
Right. Yeah. No, I again, it's the storytelling, because that's what kind of gravitated me towards X-Men. Is was almost the same thing. It was a lot of that type of storytelling, and less than than what like a lot of people get into X-Men for, is like, oh, I like Wolverine, I like Cyclops. I was more of I like storytelling, and the stories in these are amazing. Like Age of Apocalypse is one of my all-time favorite storylines. It solidified Apocalypse is one of my favorite villains in all of comics, and makes that's why when they did him in live action, great actor, terrible
Yeah, I love Oscar Isaac, but that was not the vehicle for that character, let alone for that actor playing that character, unfortunately.
I think part of the problem is because they didn't have the rights to the Kree, and Apocalypse has Kree augmentations, and that's what makes him grow.
Yeah, all that cosmic Marvel stuff that feeds into, and his technology is celestial based, eternal, and that ties into the Eternals. Like they couldn't touch any of that, unfortunately. If you have not, Philippe, I do recommend digging into the last 5 years of X books, from Hickman's House of X, Powers of 10 onward, because the creators that have been writing Apocalypse since then have done a lot of humanization of him too, in ways that are utterly fascinating. And I've learned to love him in completely different ways now, in ways that I would have never fathomed.
I mean, yeah, he's an amazing character. Just in general, I've always loved Bin Noir. He's a great character. I'm just switching cameras here because the AT-AT is done. The AT-AT is done. Let me actually show you guys real quick before we move on. So here is the AT-AT. Cockpit in the front and all. All right, it's got the legs that move. Oh, wait a minute. Should probably make it big for everyone to see it. There we go. All right. So, yeah, swivel head in the front like that. Legs, we've got a little Luke Skywalker action hanging from the bottom right there. Body opens up so then you can see the actual movements and everything. Pretty cool stuff.
Philippe, is that your laptop camera or the other camera?
My laptop camera. I have portrait mode on, so that's why it's blurring the picture.
Oh, so that way everybody thinks you're cute?
Sure. I think you're the only person in existence that thinks that. All right. Let me switch this again here. So, all right. So going back to this, we might actually be able to ask you some of the questions that we don't get to ask in a lot of cases on these ones. So let's get into learning about you and just kind of the things that kind of make you tick here, right?
Okay.
So what would be the worst movie sequel ever made? So not a sequel that's already been made. Like if they said, hey, tomorrow we're making a sequel for this movie, and you just be like, seriously?
Why? Or how do we follow this, basically?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
What are some past examples?
Past examples would be like one that was made that actually is coming out now is I guess in the past said Passion of the Christ 2, the Resurrection reboot.
Oh, and they're doing like the Ascension and all that stuff. Okay.
He was improv comedian, and he was just like, yeah, no, the Resurrection reboot, right? And and now they're coming out with Passion of the Christ 2, the Resurrection. He texted me immediately. He was like, "Oh, I was off by one word."
Can I cite a movie now that has a sequel, but although I have not seen the sequel?
Sure.
Avatar.
Okay.
The Dances with Blue People.
Dances
I don't understand the word Avatar. I don't understand. There's like Avatar Airbender, and then there's Avatar these blue people. Like, I realize an avatar is like a puppet, but I'm like, that's the name you came up with? I don't know. I'm not a fan of the name.
A stand-in or a representation. Like I really have to like pull back to really understand the connections in both properties, but that's kind of you kind of got it there. Like,
well, in Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's because essentially he can channel past versions of himself, and they can control him when he goes into the Avatar state. They can control, his body, and he can become like he becomes like super OP, right?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It fits the description, but I'm like, I don't know. It's just it's such a it's such a plain word for something like that. Is all.
Aang is the totality of all four elements too. So in another way, maybe I'm stretching, but he's sort of representing or standing in for all four elements simultaneously. If I know it's been a few years since I went through it, but that's my understanding. Like,
you're right there. That's not an incorrect way to characterize it. So with that, next question I got for you here. Who would you most like to sit next to on a 10-hour flight, and why? Now, preface, this can be anyone, dead or alive. They're back for one day. They're sitting next to you on a 10-hour flight, and you just want to have a conversation with them.
Right away, Leonard Nimoy.
Woo!
Yeah.
Spock himself.
And we don't dwell on that some of the best Star Trek movies were directed by him. And even though he didn't direct Wrath of Khan, he did have a significant influence on that story, especially the way it ended. So there's something about Leonard Nimoy, not just as a character and not just as an actor, but as just a general storyteller and creator. Like, he really digs into the material and understands it in a way that jives with me. So I would love to sit and listen to him talk about anything storytelling related, any property. If he just watched CSI, which is, procedurals are not my thing, but if he just sat down and watched CSI and could pick it apart, I would listen to that. I would eat that up.
Right. The Search for Spock, right?
And Voyage Home, the one with the whales.
The one with the whales, which now, like, I remember back then everybody freaked out about like whales in space. That doesn't make sense. Now Star Wars has whales in space, so space whales are a thing. What are you currently nerding out on?
I just went through Last of Us, and before that, I went through Echo, and I have to say I was very pleasantly surprised. I think it does something that no other MCU property does, in that it's representing indigenous culture, specifically Choctaw culture, and it is a window into a world and a community and a family that I love to see. I'm learning new things, and I'm so happy to be exposed to that. And then on another angle, I love that group of people has a moment to shine finally. So it kind of checks a number of boxes for me, but I really was really tickled and touched by the community and the family. Echo's family was pretty cool for me. And that story, that series also plays with relationships in the way we've been talking about, whether it's X-Men or Peau Noir, her relationship with Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, and the way that kind of compares and contrasts with her relationship with her parents and her cousins and her community members. Like, there's a lot of complexity there. There's a web there, and that I found very real and very human. And I love that kind of thing is in the MCU now. And it follows, it's more in the line of the Netflix series in a way. And I think that's what their intention was, and I think they nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that series, and there was a lot of people who had some hate on it and everything like that. I love that they managed to tell a compelling storyline without any dialogue. Right? Because,
I totally forgot to mention the representation of the deaf community, and like that's something I don't have much glimpse into. Like, my wife is a speech therapist, so she has some very rudimentary sign experience, but like my exposure to her doing that with her clients is probably the most I can say I've been exposed to. So seeing the deaf community and seeing it was really cool to see the members of her community and her family using it even when she's not around. So they're like keeping it up, knowing that they're going to see her again, that they love her and they want to be a part of her lives. So they're practicing it amongst themselves, even if Echo is not there. So I thought that was very touching.
Yeah, I thought that was great. And then, of course, one of the most badass fight scenes that we've seen since the hallway scene. Because that fight scene between her and Daredevil. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen Echo yet. This may give you a reason to go watch Echo.
Yeah.
The fight scene between her and Daredevil in that first episode was
not gonna lie, that was a big sell on me to watch the series, was knowing that Matt was going to be there somewhere. And it doesn't matter how little he was there, like that was enough to get me in. And then the rest of it, which is giant compared to that little nugget we get Matt is so rewarding. And if even fans of the Kingpin, and seeing how he navigates. Yeah, and like on some level, I think he does love her. It's really messed up. And of course he's manipulative and uses that to his own ends, but like there is some human relationship there that is as toxic as it is. It felt real to me. And I feel like I've seen, for better or for worse, analogs to that in other works and in other areas of my life. So that's what I'm looking for when I'm consuming or creating stories. Like I'm looking for that humanity, good and bad. So
I think part of Vincent D'Onofrio's version of that character, I think a lot of it is that he does genuinely love the people that are in his life and love, he has that relationship with his wife in the first original series. Echo basically is his surrogate daughter. But I think what it is that he's so brutal and he's so kind of broken in his own way that he doesn't see the actions that he's doing as inherently bad. And he's like, again, the relationship he has with Echo, like she believes at the point where she's at is that he used her, but he genuinely does love her, and he's trying to like be a father to her again. But it's at the same time, it's like, I know you don't trust me. I want to gain your trust back. But at the same time, he's such a brutal, broken man that, he is going to fight her if he has to and things like that. It's a profoundly messed up way to tell a story with the character.
Oh, absolutely.
But it shows, again, it shows the humanity of that character. It shows just, he's not inherently doing things to be evil. He's doing things because he thinks that this is the right thing to do, but he just happens to be a piece of shit. So it's just,
And what keeps drawing them to each other is that they see parts of themselves in one another. And like, isn't that the crux of a lot of storytelling, is identification and empathy? And even the way Echo handles him at the end is coming from a place of identification and empathy. So I can't recommend Echo enough, despite the hate online. I have to, endorse it wholeheartedly.
I mean, there's a lot of hate for a lot of these properties, and a lot of it is just a lot of it is surface level stuff that people just don't like. A lot of it is just the toxic fanboys that are like, I don't want to watch a show about a deaf woman, and all this other stuff. And it's like, yeah, but you're looking past the good story. It's the same thing with She-Hulk. Like a lot of people were complaining about She-Hulk, and it's like, well, no, it's a fun story. Like when I watched it at first, I was in that first episode, I was kind of like, well, that's not her origin story. But then when I really looked at it, I was like, yeah, but that's a better origin story. That's better than, yeah, it's better than the damsel in distress and I get attacked by a pissed off mobster and I need to get a blood transfusion and my cousin gives me a blood transfusion. Now I'm the Hulk, right? And this one is like, okay, they're driving, they get in a car accident, his blood meshes with her blood, she becomes a Hulk, and he's like, shit, I need to like fix this. And it's like, it's a very empowering story. I enjoyed it a lot, and it's very fourth wall breaking. It's very meta, as it should be, because the only other character that's as meta as she is Deadpool.
Right. She did it first, quite fairly. She did it first.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I always try to look at the good in the majority of stories and look at things as like the story overall versus the nitpicky things that so many fanboys like to pick out on.
I have one tangenty thing to say that's just eating away at me right now.
Yeah, go for it.
It's about the deaf community.
Okay.
So, I have a little bit of experience with the deaf community. My mom's best friend, Pam, both of her parents were deaf. And my mom grew up with her, hanging out with her and stuff. And so I have a couple of interesting stories that I'll save for a story. But this goes without saying, but when you lose a sense, all the other ones are heightened, and not only just heightened, you just use them differently. So one of the interesting thing about deaf people is that a lot of people think that they're nosy, and that they ask inappropriate questions. And they'll ask you how much do you get paid? How much did you pay for something? Like, they ask all these questions. And one of the reasons why they do that, they're not inappropriate in this, I don't want to say inappropriate, probably isn't the right word, but like, politically correct questions. The thing is because people are deaf, they can't hear as much. They don't hear the things that are going on around them that everybody else overhears. And we kind of take that for granted, that we're at the grocery store and we hear two people having a conversation about how much they paid for their car or whatever. So you're getting all this like information around you, around you that you are, subconsciously using to make your everyday life decisions. But when you don't have a sense to pick those things up, you're missing out on all that information. But one of the it's funny but sad stories about my mom's friend Pam. So she was taking care of her parents like towards the end of their lives, and Pam got locked in her bedroom. It's funny but not funny. So Pam got locked in her bedroom and she couldn't get out. So she called the like TTY people, like the people you call to like transmit like a message. So this is not funny. I probably shouldn't be laughing about this. Well, so she called the TTYL people and said, I need you to call my mom and tell her I'm locked in my bedroom. I need her to come help me. Well, they called her mom, who had dementia, and her mom was like, who's Pam and why is she in my house? But eventually she got out of the house. And then there was that. And then there was another time she took her dad to the ER, and she didn't know the word for a certain body part. So she was like trying her best to like tell him what the doctors need. Anyway, she has a lot of really like funny stories. My mom has a lot of really funny stories about them too. But they just and when they were kids and they would fight, they would have to like they would have to like catch each other before they hit the ground because their parents would hear them hit the ground and know something was up. And her mom could read lips like no other. But anyways, I digress on my experience with deaf people. But I just thought it's just interesting. Like they live in this whole other different kind of like world of communication and all that different stuff. So I've already talked too long.
So I got another question for you here, Tim. If there were a writer you could collaborate with, dead or alive, who would be your number one pick?
Edgar Allan Poe.
Only ask the hard-hitting questions here.
I mean, the knee jerk is Claremont. I've shaken his hand. I've met him at cons. So, but I feel like I would want to go back in time when he was really jonesing, like during that 15-year run, like 76 to 91. I would want to be, even if it was being a fly on the wall, to listen to him and Louisa Simonson, his collaborator, his editor, his co-writer, like just to listen to them and listen to them talk to their artists. Like, so yeah, like even if I'm not collaborating, I would love to just listen.
Just be a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
Nice. Another question for you here. So when it comes to, and I'm gonna kind of pivot back to Poe Noir. When it comes to your decision on some of the stories, right? So for example, when you did specifically System of Dr. Tar and Professor Feather, right? When you did that, and it's kind of like I'm assuming that's Alcatraz, right?
Yes. Yeah, it is transposed from an insane asylum in the French countryside. That's where it is in the original Poe.
Right. So like, just kind of deciding on where you're going to put that story, or deciding on Al Capone for House of the Fall of Usher. Kind of where do you come up with the thought process, the inspiration for where you're placing that story, and like the idea of taking another famous figure and transposing them into a Poe story?
Part of it is seeing what I connect to. Like with the Pendulum adaptation, we talked about how I could identify with it, both sociopolitically, but also as an entertainment industry professional. And the friendship, that relationship dissolving, but trying to make amends at the same time. So there's little things that I latch onto like that. With the System of Dr. Tar and Professor Feather, that was part of a genuine intent to pair with our anthologies. We were genuinely trying to pair a well-known Poe property, story, poem, whatever, with something that's maybe not as well-known. And I really jumped on that one because that is where the inmates run the asylum. And like those words are not in the Poe text, but like I don't know of any earlier written or set property story where the inmates are running the asylum. So, and then thinking about like, well, it's an insane asylum, French countryside, we have to move it into a more noir, specifically American context, mid-century American context. And then I have to credit my wife because she was like, just put it on an island like Alcatraz, and boom.
Nice. Oh yeah. Again, I'm a major fan of your storytelling, of kind of like the way you take the stories and translate them into something that's a little more modern. Or, I mean, it's 100-year difference from where your stories are taking place from where the original stories are taking place. And I think it's again, it's genius, it's masterclass of storytelling to be able to take those stories and move them in a way that still makes sense.
Thank you. That's so kind. I'm very flattered, and I appreciate that.
Okay. Awesome. I recommend it 100% for anybody who is interested in these stories, that do like film noir, that do like who like classic writing, because it is very Edgar Allan Poe. And again, if you read the books themselves, for all the audience out there, if you read the books themselves, at the end he does kind of link like, hey, here's the line from Edgar Allan Poe, and here's the part of the story where it makes sense, and it's like, oh, this is okay, this connects it even more. I love this. So for those of you who may not be able to connect the two together, who don't know how to do the transposition of that, he helps you with it. So it's very good storytelling. I love it a lot. Can't recommend it more. So we're gonna get into some wrap-up questions here before we finish up the show here. Again, I ask the hard-hitting questions. I only ask hard questions. So are you ready for the hardest question you've ever been asked in your life?
Let's do it.
All right. What is your favorite kind of taco?
Fish taco.
Fish taco.
That's how I've gone. I'm Southern Californian adopted now by that way, like fish taco. Like I'm Baja style. Like let's do it.
Is there a Chicago style taco?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, there's a lot of good taco places in Chicago, especially around Pilsen and Little Village. But I can't think of a specific Chicago exclusive taco style. So
I was almost gonna put my foot in my mouth and say, I mean, are there a lot of my people in Chicago? But I was like, Latin Kings run Chicago. There's a lot of us out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like the Latin Kings are a gang in Chicago. That's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What's some advice you might have for anybody trying to get into the industry, specifically the comic book industry?
Well, I'm indie. I'm self-published. Mm-hmm. So I think right away, I just want to offer my encouragement. It can be done. It does help. Like you have to raise a little bit of money. You have to figure out how to fund it because like cons are really expensive. And I hope I'm paying Graham what he's worth. Graham deserves so much. So there's that. And I mean, that's the harder part of it, the financing part of it. And I think if you are able to connect with the right creators, the right collaborators, that can help. You can find ways of it being mutually beneficial and ways to compromise and work together. And so not only from like a logistical standpoint, like that'll enrich your creative work too, because the more you're on the same page with your collaborators, the greater the work you do will be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. That is awesome. So got another hard question for you here. Who would win in a fight? JJ Giddies from Chinatown.
Yep.
Versus Dupine. Now, who's more clever, and who would be the better detective?
Dupin. He's the better detective by far, but I don't see him as battle tested as Jake Giddies is. Like Jake would take him in a fight if we're gonna go there, But I have to give Dupin or Dupin, in the original Poe, that's the better detective brain for me.
Okay. So then in the second question there, we would say Dupin is more clever.
I think so.
Just Giddies is just he's just a little more violent
and Giddies can take a beating, as we know. So
he's also the Joker.
Will take a lot of punishment.
Yeah, he's also the Joker. So I mean, he's just a complete psychopath. So
yes.
So what's next for you, man? Any aside from Poe Noir, any new projects coming out or any cons you're showing up at anytime soon?
We're going to be at WonderCon in Anaheim at the end of March, if I'm not mistaken. I should have committed that to memory, but we're going to be in our usual spot. If we'll be in Hall B, and that's another great show that I love to be at and meet people. I'd come by and let's talk some Poe, let's talk some Noir, let's talk comics. It's going to be another great weekend.
It looks like WonderCon is Friday, March 29th through Sunday, March 31st.
That sounds right. Yeah. So be there.
Or be square.
And if anybody needs to learn how to use the Metro link, they can message me directly. I used it all by myself for the first time when I was there. So I'm an expert. I still have $8. No, we were staying in Koreatown. It was like
Okay.
it was like 4 stops.
Okay. But like from that like transit center in Anaheim to the convention center, I think
It's right
not
across
too
the
bad of a walk.
it's right
Okay.
it's just
Okay.
right across the street.
Okay. Yeah. So that's public transit, guys.
Yes. And it's not that scary. There were 2 police officers in each station that I went to. Just
Public
hanging out
transit
on the
isn't scary.
platform.
I'm trying to tell her public transit's not that scary.
No, what I loved about it was that I showed up to the con because I couldn't find parking, so I just went back to the hotel and figured it out. I showed up and I was like, I took the Metro Link, and he goes, "Where's my truck?" That was his first question, and I was like, I don't know. No.
She's just like, aren't you proud of me that I took the Metro Link? And I'm like, I grew up taking the bus. That's like not an accomplishment for me.
Mhm.
You know, like I took public transit in San Francisco my entire life.
Sweet.
Yeah. So where can everybody follow you if they want to find out more? Like websites, any social media, anything that you
We're on the big 3. We're on Instagram. That is probably our most active social media channel. We're on Facebook. You guys have been great. I've been seeing it in the feed. I've been seeing it on the screen. Thank you for that. And we are on the platform formerly known as Twitter. And that's kind of the main place to put us. We have a long gestating website in the works. And hopefully we can get that up sooner or later. But Instagram is probably the primary place. That's my favorite place to show you guys what we're up to. So I'll put it that way.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show here, Tim. We had a lot of fun here talking about your book, just nerding out on things. We didn't even get into Star Wars or anything like that, man. I know
another rabbit hole.
Yeah, could have went down that rabbit hole. We did a little bit of Trek, a little bit of X-Men, but we could have easily gone down a Star Wars rabbit hole, especially with me building an AT-AT, you drinking out of an AT-AT, you know, just So that is it from us this week. Jack, put yourself over before we get off here. Any pluggables you want to plug here?
Oh, yeah, I don't really have any.
Okay. No worries. And me unprepared for my own thing here. So let me pull this up. Ladies and gentlemen, you can find us on all the social media places, all the places that you go and find things and learn things. Where it is, connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, Threads, YouTube, Discord, MySpace, Vine, GeoCities, Friendster, Second Life, AIM, Farmers Only, Christian Mingle, OnlyFans. It's only pictures of Aaron Watson's feet and mandals and the beard. Obviously, the beard's not here today, but normally he would be here. All at distance nerding. And of course, if you'd like us to break up with your girlfriend, boyfriend, significant other, pet, schoolyard bully, annoying neighbor, or just tell us how much you enjoy us, hate us, or wish the internet would consume us and spit us out at the feet of Edgar Allan Poe, send us an email at dist. Where's my button? Right there. intsnerding@aol.com, and we will read it on the show. Reason there's a pause, if you notice, there's a gap between the T and the A there. That is it from us, ladies and gentlemen. It is now time for the dance party. I did not warn Tim about the dance party. So the dance party is basically once the music starts, you just grab something, make it dance on screen, and that's basically it. So easy enough, right? So let's get this going. Once I find, there it is. Let's get this going. Oh, speaking of Peter Pan, that's a Lego Peter Pan watch.
Waiting for the bass to drop.
Distance nerding.
Yarr! Swap the poop kick.
We'll see everybody next week.